So, hi, Martin. How are you doing?
Hi, Arthur.
Thanks for jumping on this quick Zoom call and agreeing to discuss lease abstraction. Very interesting field, and probably, I'd say, one of the most promising ones for Proptech. So, for those who don't know Martin yet, Martin runs EMEA for NTrust Infotech. They do probably the best lease abstraction out there, and I thought he'd be the perfect person to talk about this. So, thanks for jumping on it once again. I thought we'd just jump into it and just start off by really explaining what is lease abstraction and why it's important in the modern day and age.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks for those kind words. Very nice of you. Just quickly explain lease abstraction if people just don't quite understand what it is. So effectively, it's the process of reading through a lease and all the relevant documents to the lease. So that could be many amendments. It's not just the original lease document. Lots of documents actually make up a lease itself. And then taking the data from that lease and providing it in a data format that is usable by those business users. Because at the moment, what we see and what I've seen over the last 20 years of being in the business is lots of departments have their own version of what they may see as a lease abstract. That is in multiple formats. It could be in Excel, it could be PDF, Word, from a report from a system. And often what we see is the data in these different versions have differences, lots of inconsistencies. So what happens is they actually have to go back and read the original lease document again. So getting the information directly from the lease, abstracting that information from the lease and providing that in a data format which is accurate, consistent, and in one central version of the truth is important, of course. And everything in the lease is there for a reason. So why wouldn't you want the information out of it to make decisions? Because effectively the lease is the rules of the game. So the key to abstraction is quality, accuracy, and consistency in one place.
Okay, very interesting. And so what would you say right now is the state of the art in terms of lease abstraction? And what can really tech do in terms of extracting the relevant information? And then, I think that's a good starting point.
So the AI technology, in any type of contract, not just a lease, it's built based on NLP, which is natural language processing. And the AI engine is there to help identify terms within that document. But so AI technology is still very much evolving for leases, very much so. And there's a couple of reasons for this. If you look at other types of documents, they're quite static. So once they're signed, they won't change. Something like an NDA, for example. So you can create easy formats for AI to read those documents. But the lease terms are constantly being modified. People are taking a renewal out as just one example. So what you have to do, you need to interpret the language of the data in the lease itself. And that's the major difference of a lease to pretty much a static document. So the current technology is there to kind of make sure that the information that comes out of that lease is in a state where people can read it and then arrive at the right interpretation. But that's the key thing. Technology isn't there yet to do interpretation. So that interpretation piece of lease abstraction has to be done manually, but has to be done by experienced property professionals and lease professionals. So that's quite key. It's not, lease abstraction isn't the magic wand to do everything. There aren't a huge amount of providers out there that do what we do. There's a handful of us, and we all kind of do things, I think, slightly differently. So some providers use a rule-based AI engine, which effectively looks at various critical data elements from the lease document itself. It tells it where to look in into the document for that specific data. Some engines will identify addresses, names, amounts, dates, for example, that's stated in the document. Others will associate a paragraph with a critical provision within the lease, renewal option, termination, for example. But these engines themselves, so the AI engine has to be trained. And to train it on a particular lease, it needs anywhere from 500 leases to thousands to learn about the format of those leases. So once trained, all the future leases are abstracted more effectively. So the accuracy improves over a period of time. So a lot of that is based on abstraction of just normal grammar, effectively. We've approached it slightly differently. So when we, instead of adapting AI technology to a very much static format, we've adopted it to handle real estate leases. So we effectively built it from the ground up. So what we had to do was effectively create multiple critical conditions that form part of each lease. And each lease is very, very different. So you have retail leases, office leases, industrial leases, residential leases. You have leases from China, Russia, UK, France, Germany. And each one will be very, very different. So the language it needs to learn, it needs that as its foundation. So, we've also, like our suppliers, you look at date, restrictions, amounts, what you would expect. But the key thing is you're actually looking at the actual clause information of the lease itself. So for each of these, we've defined the semantics, and then we refine the semantics using various example texts. So you also train the engine to associate a paragraph with more than one condition. So as it reads the paragraph, it will try to associate all the relevant lease provisions associated with that paragraph. So we've trained our engine with hundreds of thousands of leases dating back 30 years. Now, I think we've all seen those very old leases and how difficult they can be to abstract. But the AI engine needs those. It needs to understand how they work so it can easily annotate and abstract the data. So what we get from having that, we get up to 90% accuracy based on the actual lease itself. So what then happens, because what I spoke about earlier, it's not just about the AI engine, you do have to have human beings involved. So because you then get that accuracy from the initial abstraction, it allows the team to work on something with confidence. What then happens is it's not just people reading through leases. We've put in place 75 plus business rules to validate the abstracted data to check for accuracy and consistency. It then will go through a 3-stage quality check to ensure that what's given back to the customer is that 100% accuracy that they want from their data and the consistency they want from their data.
I see. So you will not just, for example, so I'm sure everyone does this a bit differently, the business model, but in your case, you're not just taking the data and then spitting out kind of a semi-processed document. You're basically doing the end-to-end service of the lease abstraction.
Yeah, I think, again, different suppliers do different things. So I can only speak on our behalf, but what we would do, so the process effectively is the customer would upload the lease documents into our system. It's called Remap. So if you see the word Remap, that's our AI data platform. They upload the documents. We then obviously check those. So the AI engine will take the first step. It will then provide the abstraction to the team, and then the team effectively will go through a process of finding where there's problems. So there's problems at the start, there's problems in the middle, there's problems at the end. So our customers will deal with us by exception, rather than have to go through every single lease. So if we see a problem, if we find something missing or something doesn't quite read right in the lease, we'll ask the customer, what does this, are we interpreting this correctly? And at the end, the customer gets the completed lease. So they either deal with by exception and they're just reviewing our work. So yes, our service is very much that end-to-end service. Give us the leases, we do the heavy lifting, all the carrying, and we just effectively give you the results and asking a couple of questions along the way. It's just taking away the pain from the customer and let us deal with the data.
Okay, I see. And a bit of a curveball. So does this mean that the legal teams that would otherwise be present in the companies are able to multiply their kind of effect? So one legal professional can do 10 times more work than they could before, or does that mean that they are no longer needed at all?
No, so the legal team is still required because the legal team is going to create the lease. I get asked this question quite a lot, actually. It's well, with all this experience, why don't you create leases? Because we're not a law firm. We're a technology provider. We don't want to be a law firm. So the legal elements of companies, whether you use external lawyers or internal lawyers, they still stay in place. But their role is to create the lease. Once they've created the lease, we then take the data because lawyers, they understand the law and understand how to create leases. Have they got the same proficiency of taking data from the leases and putting them into a real estate technical system? I would say not as well as the lease abstraction providers in the market today.
Okay, and that's something key you said there, which is bringing that data into the technical systems. And I think we'll come back to that later, but it's kind of bridging the paper into the digital effectively. That's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because abstracting lease, a manual abstraction is reading for a document and punching it into an Excel form.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And then kind of, discussing this, which is you basically are removing the manual element, or you're trying to remove it as much as possible. So you mentioned quickly NLP, the natural language processing, but what kind of technologies do you guys use? Like, what are the kind of AI components you guys have? So I'm guessing you have optical character recognition, natural language processing. What else do you guys use?
Yeah, so first of all, the document will be OCR read, and the OCR quality actually is quite critical for further analysis. So this then converts the document into a series of paragraphs. Each paragraph is then parsed using a semantics engine, which is based on the defined grammar.
By semantics engine, you mean just the kind of how the text translates effectively in terms of what it means?
Yeah. So how is the computer going to understand it? So what would happen with semantics is a particular phrase, paragraph, word. You're explaining to the computer what words actually be looking for and what linking phrases you should be looking for as well. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to create this human brain effectively. So that comes back to how our engine is built, because we've built it on leases rather than build it on generic grammar. So that's where it can gain more accuracy because it's got all the correct phrases and words from the outset, rather than having this whole other dictionary that isn't relevant to real estate. Mm-hmm. So then, based on the grammar, then the texts are framed into a few specific formats, and the system will then compare this format to the library of formats within the system. And then for clause type, for example, it's then given a score from that. So then an algorithm is then applied to identify the relevance of each paragraph and say a clause type, and then give that a relevant score. So paragraphs will then have to pass through a threshold that is set, and then if it passes that threshold, it's then associated with that condition and annotated within the document. It's important to note that a single paragraph can be relevant for more than one critical item. Similarly, one critical item can be referenced or even be modified in more than one place in a document or documents. There's multiple, could be multiple documents within the lease itself. So the AI component is always learning. Everything that goes through it is continue learning. But for it to learn, you have to update the algorithm. So in our case, we update the algorithm once a week.
That's pretty quick turnovers, to be honest. So just kind of taking a few steps back. So you mentioned the relevance score. What is it? What is this relevance score? Is it basically taking the data it's recognized and trying to match it against kind of what it some predefined parameters it has in the system? So it's basically, you know, that the lease should contain X, Y, Z, and then now you're trying to extract those elements and trying to match them to the X, Y, Z. Is that the relevance score? What is
so it's basically looking at where it picks out those words, those phrases, and against those libraries, and what is the match between the two, and against each paragraph, where does it match? So if there's lots of holes in that matching process, then it will spit out and say, no, we can't get enough information out of here, so we won't annotate that into the document because it won't be accurate.
Okay.
So what that will then do is you can specify, say, how much you want out as a reference for ourselves. And then what we will do in that instance is to say, right, a human being gets involved. The AI component has said this, and the human will read through to check to see how that works. But that's how the algorithm improves, actually, because what they find from that, where it hasn't picked it up because of whatever, the algorithm then gets updated to, so the next leaf like that comes through, it will pick it up, so the score increases.
Interesting.
So it's effectively like a dating site way. What do you like?
Yeah. So it's supervised learning effectively at the end of the day, because you're getting somebody to basically relabel the data which has not been effectively labeled. That is really interesting. So effectively, what you're saying is that unless the system is basically sure that the data it's extracted is accurate, it's not going to include it in automatically. It's going to ask for a human to help out. So, okay. So basically, at any given point in time, you prioritize accuracy over extracting as much data as possible, right?
Always accuracy.
Always accuracy.
There's no point in abstracting data that's incorrect.
No, that's true.
Accuracy has to be paramount.
Yeah, I see. And then what you said about the fact that, you feed it back data for it to learn. Actually, when I was doing my undergraduate in computer science and robotics, I was actually working on OCR myself, and it was all about it was all about handwritten OCR, and the idea was to build a system which taught itself, and it kind of combined the elements of the OCR and then matched it with the semantics engine as well.
Right.
And what happened is that if the OCR detected something, but the semantics engine detected something else, then the semantic engine would feed in the information back to the OCR engine, and the OCR engine would improve itself. So it would go from like 40% accuracy to 95% accuracy without any human interference. So it was pretty cool stuff.
It's along exactly the same lines. Yeah, you've got to teach it.
You've got to teach it. Exactly.
You've got to teach it what to do.
And that's the real AI. You're not setting up a bunch of clauses. Oh yeah, if this, then this. If this, then this. No, you're actually making something which dynamically learns, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's another cool thing because this is like a kind of moving away from real estate. When people say robots will never become doctors or do surgery, it's would you want a robot which knows cases across thousands of doctors, or would you want one doctor which only has the knowledge he has seen, right? It's what is the data are people exposed to? One individual can be only exposed to so much. One system can be exposed to what hundreds of people would be exposed to, if you see what I mean, because you're doing the Russian, the English, the Chinese, different leases, right? So you're exposed to a wide plethora of data. You're learning from a wide range of data, and you never know, they might cross over, you might learn from here or there. That's very interesting. The AI stuff always gets me very excited. So moving on, despite all this discussion about AI, the actual AI component itself is not always the most difficult. What I find in my personal experience was actually pre-processing the data and having all of the data in a consistent format to be able to use it. So I wonder how does that tie into lease abstraction? How much of it is AI? How much of it is pre-processing the data to make sure that the AI can do its thing?
Yeah, great question. you're spot on. Actually, there's a lot of prep work that needs to be done before the AI component comes into play. So, with the customers that we deal with, what we find is that some of them have the documents not as organised as maybe they should, and
don't give any names.
No, I'm not going to give. Definitely not. No, I want a job after this. So they'll have maybe rent information in one system, they'll have other documents in another, and it's a little bit maybe all over the place at times. So the first step is actually associating all the relevant documents to a lease. Yeah, that's the first critical step. So, and this is where the AI actually starts to come in. So we're not abstracting. The AI is actually looking at how the document is formed, how it's set up. So it will look through, are there missing documents? Because a document could reference another document. So is that been delivered with the initial document? Is it missing pages? So the AI can actually look at this and say, right, it goes from page 1 to 30, where's page 17? So that's, boom, it highlights an error. So that's critical because you're effectively then going back to a customer saying, okay, look, this document is missing page 17. And actually, it references amendment, and you haven't given me the amendment. So that's how we deal with that. Now, the problem with that is, so we will then go back to the customer and say, give me these documents. Generally, they just do. They go and find them and they upload them to us. But sometimes they struggle. So that's where you can help the customer start cross-referencing, cross-checking other systems to try and find the alternative data from other areas of their business, just to try and help them. Generally, people give you the missing documents, but they didn't realise that it was missing. So we've abstracted over 1 million leases, and it's quite a shocking figure. More than 35% of the leases we get sent are incomplete. It's quite frightening.
And are they incomplete because, again, they've misplaced the documents, or are they incomplete because they just, from the get-go didn't collect all of the correct information?
So it's a few reasons. So one is the lease they have, they've scanned it and they've missed a page out the scan. Mm-hmm. So we see that. So that's going back, and that could be 10-year-old lease. And, what if that one page has all the tenant clauses, for example? Or they've sent us some amendments and they've missed out a certain amendment. So how the rent history it hasn't worked correctly. So, but they're always not always, but they're generally unaware that these are incomplete. So they've been taking data from these incomplete documents from the outset. So when we go back to them, it's not a shock, but they didn't realise, and it's like, it also then highlights the value of actually having it abstracted properly. Because think, right, we wouldn't have known this if we didn't do this. So, but that's where technology has to focus first. The AI component is great. Abstracting data is fantastic. But if you don't get it right from the outset, if you don't get your foundations in place, then, as you quite rightly say, Arthur, what you're abstracting isn't complete.
Yeah.
So that's where technology has to focus. It has to start there, not just about abstracting data from leases.
Mm. And I mean, it sounds like a lot of work. Well, why not just operate in the kind of modus operandi they already have, which is incomplete data? Like, if they've not realized it, then why bother? Will it bite them in the long term? Do you think? Come back to them in the long term?
Yeah, of course. Maybe not be a popular answer, but of course, it's going to come back and potentially hurt. Because
You've got to be more alarmist so people buy this stuff. It's going to ruin everything if they don't have data.
I think that if you look at what happens now. So if I look at why are we in this place? Why have we got inaccuracies in data? So if you look at the current manual process, current traditional abstract manual process. So that will be done by a lawyer, a property manager, someone in the department, and effectively they're reading through a lease and they're punching it into a system or they're putting into a spreadsheet, whatever happens. So what we see from that approach is it creates two errors. You have an omission error and a commission error. So an omission error is where someone has failed to read a particular part of that document, maybe a paragraph within the document, or they've actually missed a whole document itself. A commission error is where they've actually read a document, but they've misinterpreted the term within the lease. So both of those could create catastrophic consequences, because you could have missed a key part that hits you financially. So that comes back to where technology has to come in, and technology is actually focused on reducing those omission errors. That's the AI. That's where AI really comes into its own. It's getting rid of those omission errors. And again, speaking to the customers, coming back to the data not being right. So what comes back to us and what we see is there's a big gap in forecasting data, budgeting data, because it's not always done with accurate data. And you see there's multiple parties involved, property managers, lenders, investors, and generally, not always, but generally, a lot of people are using their own data sets, but different versions of the same data. So how can you forecast and budget on different data sets, inaccurate data sets? So if you get that abstracted correctly, get that data set up correctly in that one central place, that one central version of the truth for everyone to use, then people are going to forecast, people are going to budget with confidence and with data they trust. That then comes back down to dealing with the problem of collating some of that data. So I would have, the way we deal with that is, I kind of talk through a lot of that, but if I just kind of piece it together. So the first thing we just spoke about was the pre-processing phase, which is all important. Finding where the problems are before you start. So once you find all your problems, you fill those gaps, you then abstract the data with confidence. That finds the vast majority of the detail. They go through the quality assurance phase. So, so we do a 3-stage quality assurance. Then lastly, and really importantly, we haven't spoken about this yet, is the integration of that quality data into the client third-party system. So obviously you can still read it within the lease abstraction, so ours is Remap, but people also want it in their chosen system. So it goes to a property system, an MRI, a Yardi, it goes into a VTS, budgeting systems like Anaplan, Argus, Salesforce CRM, MuleSoft as a middleware, data warehousing, you name it, it goes there. But so by sending that data seamlessly, and it's not just sending a file for them to then play with it, it's actually getting that data directly and seamlessly into those systems to, again, take away that pain from the customer. So when they do start utilizing that data, again, they're doing it with confidence and with little pain and little effort.
So effectively, every division in the business can be like basing everything on the same truth, the same language, effectively. Everyone's speaking the same language, effectively, by having this kind of stuff in place. All right, I see. I was actually going to ask you, well, what is the benefit that the people can have from having access to this data, but you just answered that. So,
sorry, yeah.
I mean, the last question then would be, so it's obvious that this technology is needed. I mean, it's obvious to technologists like me. I'm all about digitizing processes, right? So why is it not more widely available? Why is it not more widely implemented, I would say, in the industry? Why is everyone not using this as a default and standard, or are they already?
That's a good question. I wish they were all using it. I think part of it is, do companies know they actually have a problem? Data goes in. My lawyer abstracts it. Of course it's correct. Of course it's correct. Why wouldn't it be? The lawyer's giving it to me, so it must be correct. So they don't see it as incomplete. They think it's complete. So as far as they're concerned, maybe they don't have that problem until it then comes back to bite them down the way. And if they do think they may have a problem, data is a big thing. Everyone talks about big data, central version of the truth, blah, blah, blah. But do people actually want to open that can of worms? Because once you get into a data project, of getting the data together, is it accurate? Bringing all these systems together, that's a big project.
It is.
It's a big
really
project.
Is.
Yeah, and do people actually want to do that? We'd gladly do that. That's what we do. Yeah, it's not just that we're data solution provider, but I understand why people don't want to open that can of worms. But they can actually do it. They can gradually potentially get there. So some of the work we do, for example, is when we do audit work. So people check the current data within their systems. So that comes from a lease abstract to auditing what's in there. So effectively, it's starting from scratch. We abstract all the leases, take all the information out, and then effectively we're comparing it to what's in their current system. And then you have all these exception reports. Then you're missing X, Y, and Z. And then we update X, Y, and Z. So then they have that version of the truth. And from then, you would say to the customer, right, okay, new leases, abstract properly. Amendments, again, abstract. Because then it's just ongoing. So
you bring them to a baseline, and then you just ask them to basically continue using the system. Yeah, I see. Yeah, but you are completely right. It is a huge project to take on, connecting all the systems together. I mean, connecting systems together so that not only data is spoken between them, but true normalized data is spoken between them, right? Because you don't want to be feeding data which is incorrect, or data that, despite looking like it has a correlation, is not normalized. So there's actually, you're getting false information out of it. And we've been doing that on a consistent basis throughout our company. But even so, all of us being technologists, again, it is really a pain in the butt, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I think from that though as well, because if you think about that, all the different systems. So, for a property management system, you could use an MRI, you could use a Yardi, a Trace, or whatever. You could be using Anaplan, Argus for valuations and forecasting. You could be using Salesforce for CRM, BTS for your broker. And that's quite commonplace. And if you take away, because everyone would have expertise in each one of those systems, but does everyone have expertise in all the systems? So by just saying, look, you don't have to worry about being an expert in all these. Data's data. And as long as you can understand the structures, then we can bring that all together. I mean, that comes down to when we integrate systems, the Yardis, the MRIs, the Salesforce, Argus, for example.
Do you ever integrate the systems between each other?
Yes, all the time. It happens every day. It happens every day.
Do they know that they're being integrated together?
It's just data. We've got projects ongoing. So from a property perspective, we've got a project ongoing from data going from MRI to Yardi going to MRI. This happens all the time. So we're ensuring that the data that goes from one to the other is in the format that they need it in for that system, and it's correct and accurate. We don't care If it's MRI, Yardi, Argus, Anaplan, Salesforce, data, we don't care. As far as we're concerned, it's the accuracy of the data, and it goes to a system where they can utilize it like that.
Yeah.
We're system agnostic.
System agnostic. That's the way to be, I think. I think that's the way it's going, the future.
It's, there's a lot of great tech out there, a lot of great prop tech out there. And the key is actually bringing that data together and having that mindset of wanting to do that as well. So I think that's important. But it will always come back down to efficiency and accuracy.
I agree. Well, thank you for answering all of my questions. Do you have any more points?
Yeah, got one more point actually, which the people watching, listening may not be aware of, because what we see when we abstract information, when I said we've been comparing systems, kind of auditing and then replacing data. On average, only 30% of the data is abstracted from a lease in the normal process. So 70% of the data in the lease doesn't get abstracted normally. Why? Why is that? If it's in the lease, surely it's important. Yeah. Surely it's important. And 70%? That's crazy. So, but why are companies only taking 30%? That's the question. I've had some thoughts on this. It's, the more you take, the longer it takes. The longer it takes, the more money it costs. But I think if you can provide companies with something that can be done in a really timely manner, something that can be very cost effective to provide a meaningful, accurate data, I think people will embrace it, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want 100% which is maybe quicker and more cost effective than getting 30%? So, because information makes decisions at the end of the day, and accurate information, data, makes better decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Data is power. That is.
I know everyone says it. It's probably boring for people now, but it's by just saying it is one thing. Let's just get all our data. It's how you get there is the important thing, because if you're taking data from a system, just transfer it to another, you're arguably taking incomplete data and then transferring it to another incomplete data set.
Yeah, I agree. And that is why all of these big tech companies right now have big advantages, because they have access to all of this data that most people don't. And actually,
crucial.
And interestingly enough, I think in the real estate industry, maybe a data is a nice to have right now, and people are getting maybe a competitive advantage by having it, but potentially in the near term, it's not even going to be about competitive advantage anymore. It's going to be about surviving. So if you don't have the data, you're not going to be able to perform, right? It's after a certain critical mass of adopters adopts a technology or kind of an ethos or modus operandi, then who doesn't adopt it falls behind, right? So for the moment, it's something which pushes them forward. In the near future, they might get left behind if they don't.
I think in today's, so again, we've seen quite a lot of this actually. Taking 100% of the data. So with the problems tenants are having with paying their rent, or maybe even refusing to pay their rent, what clauses in the lease to actually how do we deal with this? Are any provisions in that lease to help us here? And at the moment, most things aren't taken. So what people are doing, they're reading through the lease, trying to find anything which is associated, whereas you can just go, oh, look, it's there.
Control F, Control find.
Is there a force majeure here? Right, okay, there's the terms. You just save yourself a huge amount of time.
Especially nowadays when force majeure is being called in by a lot of people, right? So
yeah, absolutely. That's why I mentioned that one. That's just one element. And so we see that a lot.
Okay, awesome.
We've been asked to do a lot of reports for people actually. They just said, look, can you write some reports on all these clauses for us? Just we just need you to help a little bit help with this. So that's fine.
It's quite interesting because also when this kind of stuff happens, they can create one quick query and then see what percentage of their portfolio could potentially invoke a force majeure clause and just stop paying rent. So they could see what their cash flows are going to be like in the next 3 or 4 months.
Really and quickly. It's not just had it got a force majeure clause, it's what is in there. Mm-hmm. Because you can just go tick a box, yes, it's the force majeure clause in a lease, but what's the actual data associated with that clause?
I see. That's interesting. Yeah, technology, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've been in it a long, long time. You can probably tell, I had hair once. I was once like you, Arthur.
Head full of hair. I was completely bald about a month ago. But, yeah.
So was I.
Awesome. Well, so thanks a lot for the chat. It was a pleasure, and yeah, really, really interesting insights. And I hope we can touch base soon again to see how the industry progresses.
Great to speak to you again, Arthur. Keep safe, and I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you.